I've come to meet the darkness in the darkness, at the end of the land, facing the sea, the vast, the unlimited. Critchley. Void is the end. It is called antimatter, oblivion, nothing, death, darkness, vacuum, hole, lack, hollow, limbo, null. Void is the end. It is eternal. The only true eternity is the end, the thing that happens after all things, to which we are not privy, to which the materials of the universe are not privy. What happens after we die? This query is the catalyst for 100 generations of speculation on the post-mortal. We speculate in order to navigate the void, or avoid it altogether, an impossible task. The void is an inferno of darkness, a black flame without heat that radiates timeless shadow into infinity. The void is an eternity without perpetuated lack. This can be a cause for both despair and elation, perhaps simultaneously. Each individual appears to have two voids, one ending at birth and one beginning at death, the place and time at which the solipsistic universe does not exist. Perhaps they are the same void, wrapped around life. If everyone experiences the same void, it could be said that it is a collective void. In this case, one must question if the universe requires a conscious observer in order to exist, otherwise, itself being consumed by the void the instant the last conscious entity in the universe is extinguished. Void is the end. Some are touched by the void before they plunge. They have felt the icy chill of nothingness infecting their mind. It can feel as if one's head is being pushed below the surface. After a time, one has no choice but to inhale. It would not be right for me to contemplate thresholds and finality without acknowledging and exploring suicidal potentialities, including my own. I'm not talking about ideological suicides such as martyrdom, suicide bombing, harakiri, etc. I'm talking about the individualistic inaction of one's self-homicide. I recently crossed a threshold. A part of me was hewn from my soul. An experience of such unpredictable psychic brutality that it left me cavernous, vacant and without a spine to keep myself standing. It washed away that which made me powerful and happy, like leaves in a storm, and left me to contend with the fact that I am now hollow and evanescent. My other half was gone. My first, instinctive reaction was to think, how can this be fixed? As though relationships are machines that can be engineered, assembled and adjusted. No humanity, no life. Despair makes us blind to all but function. I realized that I was standing balanced on the edge of a void, my toes dangling over the edge. The wind of the abyss howled in my face as the veil of ignorance was torn away. I was no longer blind to the plunge ahead. Once my eyes were freed, they were useless for sight. All they did was weep. I cried for the loss of my friend. I cried in mourning for the dissolving of half of my life. I cried for cruel things said and done in the name of love, all flooding back to me in an instant of grief and guilt, and I cried because I knew that, as I had promised 1,000 times, I would love her for the rest of my life. When I cry, my eyes turn the bluest they can go. The pain and fear and loneliness of suicidality shines through, photons of despair through an azure filter. When it feels as though half your body is wrought from you by the loss of a loved one, what justification is there for preserving what remains? After the initial period of despair and confusion, I settled into a period of simmering self-resentment. Like the formation of a star, violent and expressive for a brief beginning, then boiling and churning away, floating through the void as it burns itself away. K. Redfield Jameson states that suicidal depression is a state of cold, agitated horror and relentless despair. The things that you most love in life leach away. Everything is an effort, all day and throughout the night. There is no hope, no point, no nothing. I felt like sentient bile, viscous and fetid inside a thin membrane, only being seen as human because of uncanny pareidolia. A worthless sack of odious discharge. No one questions whether a sack of bile has any value or not, they simply dispose of it. Unable to continue with my day-to-day, I dropped out of functioning life and spent the next year weighing up whether to leap from the edge into the end. whether to pass the event horizon, the universal point of no return, and submit myself and my life to the void. The year was one of calculations, weighing and reducing my values as an algebraic performance, calculating the formula for my life. Calculating my loves, my joys, my family, my friends, my happiness, my trauma, my past, my future. Just a constant calculation reducing down into a unified solution. Is the solution enough to save my life? So far, yes. But I have not yet escaped the horizon, the void, the plunge. In one way I am already falling. The pit is seemingly endless. I know it has a base, however. The question is whether it will be the surface from which I dig myself out, or onto which I smash my body. Self-destruction can seem like a fittingly pointless and violent way to end oneself in the face of pointless and violent pain and inequity. Truly, it is cutting off the nose of life to spite the face of the world. Self-homicide is inherently irrational. An old man sits in a wooden chair, his back hunched, cowering against his humble surroundings. His hands are balled into violent fists, pushing into his face as if he is attempting to gouge out his eyes. The pain, frustration and despair can be seen forking down the man's figure like lightning. Van Gogh's Sorrowing Man is a depiction of extreme but personal anguish. The figure is closing themselves off from the world, drawing in, hiding from the light and life, a tacit step towards the void. To my mind, the painting is a depiction of an individual in liminal contemplation, knowing the true horizon and acknowledging the potential of the void. It represents the churning of suicidal ideation. The world has become a mush of muted hues encircling a nameless, faceless figure whose stature is defined by muscles contorted in mental anguish. The lines of the walls and floor seem to point towards the figure, like a target. In moments of extreme despair, it can feel as though the world is closing in, pointing its anthropomorphic eyes in one's direction, judging, mocking, shouting. Perhaps this is why it's so easy to destroy our possessions and environment in these situations. We are fighting back against the scenery that provokes and targets us, that works alongside our inner pain to empty us into the void. Van Gogh's suicide is most likely to have been motivated by his well-known struggle with chronic mental illness, posthumously diagnosed as manic depression, a condition that is common amongst creative individuals. In a letter sent to his mother and sister on 14 July, 1890, Vincent writes, "The turmoil in my head has really abated so much." However, 15 days after the letter was sent, and 2 months after the completion of Sorrowing Man, Van Gogh was dead from suicide, exemplifying the rapidity at which his mental illness could dip his mind back into the void. When I look at Sorrowing Man, I feel a kinship in agony. I know and understand the pain and rawness that compels one to gouge out one's eyes. I know the feeling of my knuckles in my eye sockets pushing in the tears and hiding the world. I, too, felt every atom around me compelling me to step towards the void. I know how the walls pointed and laughed at my realization that there seems little reason to go on, and mocking how my loneliness makes me believe that I am a feebled and crooked old man. Ideation can be a slow throbbing undercurrent, or it can be an intense battle of emotion. Often it transitions between them. To my mind, Sorrowing Man is a depiction of the latter, and a reflection of my own trauma manufactured almost exactly 100 years before I was born. Chorin states that suicide is an act propelled by hope. It embodies the hope that once the horizon is passed there will be something else, something better, something more, something that isn't this, or simply, nothing. In that case, perhaps hope is not necessary for me in this instance. Perhaps the best thing for happiness and preservation is to forget, to move on, towards a new horizon away from the void. However, in her book, Bluets, Maggie Nelson writes, "For to wish to forget how much you loved someone, and then, to actually forget, can feel, at times, like the slaughter of a beautiful bird who chose, by nothing short of grace, to make a habitat of your heart. Though I suppose I must accept that in my case the bird has already flown, and the thing which I must slaughter is only its ghost, its memory, its hologram, projected onto my mind and heart. Perhaps also the hope of ideation is misplaced, the faith in the void is faulty, and the act of attempting to surpass the horizon instead ties one even tighter to pain and reality. Maurice Blanchot writes in Thomas the Obscure, "The man who is hanging himself, after kicking away the stool on which he stood, rather than feeling the leap which he is making into the void feels only the rope which holds him, held to the end, held more than ever, bound as he had never been before to the existence he would like to leave." Finally, I return to Critchley once more. Suicide might grant life coherence, but only by robbing it of complexity by viewing it through the instant of one's death.